I'm happy to have with us Dr. Elizabeth Dale. She's an expert at the forces at play when it comes to women and money and charitable giving. Thank you so much for flying across the country.
You're welcome.
To be with us today. Really appreciate it. So I guess, let's begin with the macro picture of what is going on in the world, the economy. We're battling inflation, rising rates, volatile markets, geopolitical effects, supply chain issues, a pandemic, deep division in the political divide in the US, and the list goes on. Against the backdrop, what does your research show when it comes to women facing some of these societal pressures and dealing with these things? Women have always been change makers. However, I have to believe that there's a renewed sense of urgency for women and a little bit of momentum picking up based on the backdrop of some of these things that I just talked about.
Well, thanks, Paul, and thanks for the introduction. You're absolutely right. Women are change makers. They have historically been change makers and doers. And that's no different today than it was before. Whether we look back in history, we see women involved in the Underground Railroad, in women's suffrage, post-industrialization, women pressed for free kindergarten, expanded education, child welfare, the 8-hour workday. So women have always been at the forefront of social movements. And I think any time that there's social unrest, it's a time for us to reflect and take kind of stock of where we are. And your list of current events, there's a lot going on right now. So we do see, I think in some cases, a renewed sense of needing to make that change. We've seen, as a result of the pandemic, many women engaged in community giving, setting up community fridges or mutual aid networks. Starting in 2020, we saw Mackenzie Scott step out in a huge way with her giving. And other women have followed suit. Black Lives Matter, for example, was founded by 3 women. So women have been at the forefront of social change. I think women will continue to play that role. I think what we're also seeing is that women are choosing of so many more diverse roles from that experience. There's not just one path that women can take. Maybe it's giving, maybe it's using the power of your story, maybe it's something else.
Do you think there's momentum, though? Do you think there's anything different now than before?
Women have never had access to as many financial resources and other resources, positions of power. So yes, they're leveraging all of that.
Mm-hmm. And what about the pandemic? Do you think the pandemic has been a catalyst for much of this? Well,
the pandemic, we know, had a disproportionate impact on women in terms of job loss, in terms of needing to kind of manage homeschool as well as work. And so I think that caused a lot of people to reassess what they were doing, both in their own lives and for others.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So let me switch to a different topic. As of 2020, women in the US controlled $11 trillion, about a third of financial assets. And that number could reach $30 trillion by 2030, and it's hard to believe that's only 8 short years away. And as women control an increasing proportion of wealth, one thing we do know is that women give to more charities and have given more in the past 2 years than men. So you've studied this, you've seen this. What are some of the differences you see in giving between men and women? And are women and men motivated differently when it comes to impact, their legacy, and what they want to accomplish?
Yeah, that's a great question. And me and my colleagues at the Women's Philanthropy Institute at Indiana University have studied this for over a decade now. We know that women do give differently. Women actually give more when we control for things like income and education. Women are more likely to give. They give more in real dollars. They also volunteer more. And that giving looks a little bit different. Women are more likely to spread their giving out more than men to more organizations. And of course, these are all averages. But we also know men and women are motivated by different things. Women are empathic. They connect with the needs of others. Men, oftentimes giving is more aligned with their social networks and social recognition. And so we see different motivations there. In some of my research, you might even think of like an example of a charitable event you've been at. You know, who's bidding at the live auction? It's probably not the women, right? The men are in competition with each other. And you mentioned collaborative giving in your introduction. Women are really drawn to collaborative giving circles, giving together is a really important way to connect women and to do good. So I think, you know, there are different things that are bringing men and women to the sort of charitable table, and those motivations do differ. One example from my research, I had done some research on $1 million gifts, and I looked at how single men and single women, what they did with these gifts. Single men were much more likely to have made the gift in their own name or maybe the name of them and their spouse. Women almost never named things for themselves. They named it for their husband, maybe their family. It was always much more likely to be a tribute to someone else. So those are just some of the examples.
You know, you bring the vision to me of live auctions, and a lot of men will outbid each other. But I mean, I think that's a good thing because you see the dollars go up. But it definitely is a little bit of competition going on at a lot of these auctions. Yeah.
Yeah, and even in asking for a gift, men really respond well when they're asked by a peer. Women want to see the impact. They want to know where that gift is going, and oftentimes have some connection to the recipients or the organization as well.
Interesting. Now, while many women are financially engaged, our research has shown consistently that about half of married women still abdicate or defer long-term investing to their spouse. And we've done a lot of research about why that is. And we've also found about 25% of spouses do things together, and 25% of women lead. So it's 50% abdicate, 25% share, 25% lead in terms of women. One of the things that we see is that the abdicator women, even though they sit on the sidelines, when it comes to charitable giving, almost 90% of those women are actually taking control when it comes to charities. And I guess the question for you is, do they recognize how much more impact they would have if they would become more involved in financial decisions with their spouse?
Yeah, our research has found some of the similar patterns. Charitable giving is often treated much like a purchase decision, not a long-term financial decision. And so it's not surprising that women are taking the lead in giving. Plus, many women just report more satisfaction from doing that kind of financial spending in their household. But fewer women, actually more women are leading the giving for their families or are involved in shared giving with their spouse. And when that happens, we actually see giving increase in the household. So women can have this positive influence in giving. And in terms of the long term, you know, I do think charitable giving can be sort of this gateway into longer term financial planning, because it can often be a way to realize what you have and what you have to give from. In the US, still only 5% of Americans make any kind of estate or legacy gift, a bequest of any sort. And there's a huge opportunity there to give at the end of life as well as during someone's life.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think that you know, there's a lot of people that plan for end of life and their legacy, but as we think about money being spent, it's sort of part of their spending portfolio to think about the charitable giving. So there's two aspects to this, and you're right about financial planning. You'll probably get to a better answer if you have a financial plan, because you know what you can leave at the end, and you can know what you're going to leave while you're alive, giving while living, as we like to call it.
Absolutely.
Let me just jump to a different topic. I found this really, really interesting in our research, that we see a lot of differences by generation. So when it comes to supporting causes, for example, baby boomers women are more likely to focus on helping religious organizations and fighting poverty, and millennials are more apt to focus on social justice and their alma mater. Do you feel like generationally you're seeing pockets of money going different places? And if so, I'd love to hear about it. And do you have any insight into Gen Z, the new generation coming up that tend to fascinate me more than millennials?
Well, Gen Z is tricky because they're not anywhere close to their peak earning years yet. But yes, the boomer generation, they know their United Ways, their local community foundations. They're more likely to be religious and to identify with a religious denomination. That's really melting away for millennials. That religious tie often isn't there. There's a lot of mobility in their lives, so maybe they're a part of many different communities. And they're more likely to seek out kind of a newer organization or even an international organization that they want to support. We definitely see the same trend in terms of millennial interest in social justice giving. I think that is the conversation that's happening right now. And that giving often looks different. It's maybe less directed towards basic needs and more directed to a longer-term vision for change, whether that's through giving or through even their life's work. And the other thing is that for millennials, if they inherit money, they might often feel like that money isn't theirs. That was their grandparents or maybe their parents, and so they seek to do different things with it, not just to sort of save it for their own well-being, for their own children, but they want to put it to use, and so they're seeking new ways to do that. And in terms of Gen Z, I think the social justice finding might continue, but I teach Gen Z and they surprise me all the time, so I can't predict the future.
Well, Dr. Dale, thank you
You're very welcome.
For your insights. It's very much a pleasure to have you here to give some reflection on our report and what you see at a macro view. So thank you again, and we really appreciate you coming all the way from Seattle.
Of course.
Thank you.